Hello everyone, and welcome back to Aero League Racing Season 14, Round 1. You join me here at Bahrain. My name is Aman, and I will be your commentator for the season. Hopefully won't be ditching it in between like I did last time. Hello Saeed, good to see you as always. Before we get started off here, and we only have a little bit limited amount of time, I'm doing great, Saeed. Doing well. The family as well. Yeah, everyone's doing great. I hope everyone's good at your family, and you yourself are doing fantastic as well. But yes, let's talk about the track a little. Bahrain. So no chances of rain here, as we've seen in previous iterations. I mean, the chance always exists, but a track like Bahrain, I highly doubt it's going to rain here. A high-speed circuit, definitely, for sure. And there are a few tight and twisty sections around here. I'm sorry, I'm a bit rusty. It has been a hot minute since I have commentated, but regardless, should be in store for an exciting race very, very soon. And as always, get yourself comfortable. Maybe grab something to eat or drink. Grab a loved one. And we should be getting started very, very soon. So you actually ended up finding the stream. Hello. I'm assuming that this is Freya. Nice to see you, Freya. Welcome to the stream. We should be getting started very, very soon. Okay. Alright then, ladies and gentlemen, with that, we are all set to get the Bahrain Grand Prix underway. First off, we'll be qualifying. I think I'm seeing that a few drivers won't be able to make it to qualifying and will be joining midway through quali, so we'll stay anticipated for that. It would be a good chance to actually talk about the teams, assuming I can bring those up for myself. Just give me 1 second. Right. Okay, so let's discuss some of the teams out that we have for this season. So, racing for Williams, we have Font and DDK. Racing for Ferrari, we have Dax and Bang Average Seb. Saeed and the Wicked Prophet will be racing in the Alpine. Zab and Will be racing in the Aston Martin. Bambino and Julio, I guess, or Julio, will be racing in the Mercedes. Jags and oh god, I'm gonna butcher this name. Prezemu racing in the McLaren. Steba and Cunning racing in the Alfa Romeo. We have Jaguar and Trems in the Red Bull. Ella and Samet racing in the Haas. And Jim and Haggis racing in the AlphaTauri. We have a few reserve drivers for this season as well, who I'm sure will come in very, very handy. But right before everything else, I should be getting the track data up. It should be good to go. Hello, Knock. Good to see you. Goodbye, Freya. Thank you for tuning in. There we go. Right then, ladies and gentlemen, we are all set to get qualifying underway here as we see that the first car out on track, as a matter of fact, is Font. We obviously know that the Mercedes team should be lined up very, very nicely here. Font, who was very upset about being placed in Tier 2. We'll see how he performs here, believing that he should have been in Tier 3. But regardless, he is here now, so he has to make the most out of a bad situation. We'll be riding on board with him as he hopefully sets the first time lap around the circuit. And not much longer now before that gets underway. We can see not Cunning, but Steba right behind him. And I believe that would be his Williams teammate DDK, who's even further back. And it is. So talking about this track, 3 DRS zones, first through the pit straight, then following turns 1, 2, and 3, and 4, I believe. And then there is the second, then there's the third DRS zone, of course. So definitely a high-speed track for sure. Drivers are going to be going for a more less downforce of a setup in their setup, and will be opting to go for that top speed. But regardless, we ride on board with Font as he comes through the final corner and begins, hopefully, as he comes across the line soon enough, we'll be beginning the first time lap of the season. And here we go. So obviously he has a bunch of traffic to worry about ahead of him. Font's gonna have to be careful to not get to everybody else is going to have to be very careful that they don't impede his run on this occasion. But coming through turns 1 and 2, Font looks like he's keeping the car very, very steady, hugging the right side of the wall, and now entering the second DRS zone of this track. Daxi about to set a quicker lap time than 95% of Tier 1. Oh, brilliant. Glad to see that. There's some Tier 1 drivers still slipping into Tier 2, but regardless, obviously setting a purple Sector 1, but that being because he is the first car to cross the first sector. We'll be seeing, keeping an eye on his lap times as he progresses through this lap. Now coming towards the second DRS detection point, we do have a yellow flag in Sector 2 as there's a bunch of cars bunched up over there. And now Font coming through the third DRS zone, the final one, following an extremely fast left-hander. It's very easy to unsettle the car here, especially if you ride on those curbs a bit too much, but it looks like Font has it very much nailed down to a T. Does not look like he's struggling very much at all throughout the course of this lap, but obviously we'll see how he compares to the rest of the drivers as the session progresses. Font now coming through the final corner on track. Being the first driver to set a competitive lap time, let's see what he's going to set for himself to set the benchmark. He sets a 129.9, a decent time. We can see Samet, unfortunately, a bit far back. Sorry, DDK now coming through the final corner on track. What time will he set? Stava actually setting provisional pole with a 128.9. Now DDK coming across the line. He sets a 129.7 and promotes himself up into P2. So definitely a lot of progress to be made from both the Williams teammates there. Font unfortunately being roughly a second off and DDK being roughly a tenth off of provisional pole time. But let's progress down and see where else everybody else is on the map. We can see Sabat now coming towards the end of Sector 2. We'll see if there's anyone ahead of him. I believe there is the Aston Martin. I want to make sure that is Will. And now Will now coming across the line. What time will he set? Sets a 130.3. Not a very competitive lap time from him. Bang average 7. The Ferrari managing to set a 129.8. We'll right on board with Sabat now as he's coming through the final corner on track. There is an AlphaTauri ahead of him. Now Samet now coming across the line. He sets a 129.5. Still relatively 6/10 off the pace from provisional pole, but a better competitive lap time from the rest of the grid as we've seen. Cunning Fern now looks like he's beginning his... Actually, he's coming in for most likely... Or is he going for a second run? No, I don't believe he has enough ERS to even go for a second run. Oh, Jack is racing in Tier 2. Interesting. Is he a reserve? I didn't even realize. And he has invalidated his lap time, unfortunately. Steva still currently sitting in provisional pole. Trems now. See what sort of lap times he can set. Does manage to set a purple sector too. So things are definitely looking up for him. It doesn't look like anyone's really getting too close. And just as I say that, Bambino sets a 129.1. Roughly 2/10 off of Steva's lap time. But now... riding on board with Trems as he comes through with DRS wide open, sets a 129.6 and manages to promote himself up into P4. Obviously, a few new faces that I'm not entirely familiar with, so it'll take me a second to get used to it. Oh, Jack is a reserve. That makes sense. Larry does not seem to be on any competitive lap times himself. Zab is a bit far back at the moment. Jim now coming across the line. What times will he set? He sets a 129.3. Promotes himself up into provisional pole. Into P3 at the moment. And with that, I don't think there's really going to be any more improvements throughout the first run in qualifying. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, let's take a quick review of where all the drivers are standing. Steva currently in P1 with a 128.9. Bambino not too far behind in the Mercedes with a 129.1. Jim keeping in close with the AlphaTauri with a 129.3. Samet in P4 in the Haas with a 129.5. And Blurry now just hitting a competitive lap time himself, promoting himself up into P5 with a 129.6. So already the Mercedes team looking very, very strong in the first quarter of this of qualifying. It'll be interesting to see if they can keep it up. I was told that Daxi will be setting a lap time that's faster than most of Tier 1, so why not ride on board with him? Obviously driving for Ferrari, his teammate Bang Seb currently in P8. He's going to need to definitely improve those competitive lap times. Also, I have not seen this Ferrari livery before. This is very new to me. He is managing to get the toe off of the Aston Martin in front of him, though. This will greatly help him in that straight line speed and will definitely increase his chances of landing himself on provisional pole. Apparently one of the strongest drivers in contention to win the championship this season, as Alu has now managed to join the session. Welcome, Alu. Good to see you. He does manage to set a purple sector 2 with a 106.2, I believe it was. And now with only one more corner left to go, will Dax be able to manage to put, will he be able to put himself on provisional pole? Let's take a look here. Coming through the final corner now, and now approaching the DRS zone. DRS wide open. Dax currently in P17, hasn't set a competitive lap time, and now he does with a 128.7, 2/10 faster than Steva. He manages to take provisional pole, and with only 10 minutes left on the clock, there's not a whole lot of time for the rest of the drivers to respond, though Steva, who is currently in P2, is now out for his competitive run. He's coming towards the end of his outlap. Does have a McLaren in front of him, which must be frustrating to deal with. He's hopefully going to manage to create enough of a gap so that he wouldn't catch up to him on his fast lap, and it looks like he might have just barely done so now. Steva now coming across the line will be beginning his second timed run. Coming towards the end of sector 1, manages to avoid the AlphaTauri coming out of the Haas coming out of the pits there. Ooh, and a bit shaky through that corner there. Steva trying to find the grip, but struggling to do so. Maybe due to those cold tire temperatures. Hopefully he did manage to get them up. But as of right now, he's still definitely struggling. Now coming through sector 1, where that grip is so important. He's already a 100th down on his time, with still tons of opportunities to bring that time back up. He is catching up to the McLaren in front of him. Doesn't look too good for him. Hopefully he can still maintain that gap that he had planned out before starting his timed run. And now coming towards the second DRS zone with the third DRS zone with DRS wide open now. He's definitely getting a toe off of the McLaren ahead of him. And as he rounds off sector 2, we'll be seeing if he's up or down on his lap time at the moment. And it seems to be with a 106.8. He is roughly 2/10 up on his current lap time. Has set a purple sector 2, so the fastest lap time of that section. And now Steva coming towards the final corner now. He didn't manage to catch up to the McLaren ahead of him, thankfully, so there's not going to be any worries from him about the McLaren messing or impeding with his lap times. However, as Steva now comes across the line, will he be able to challenge for pole? Yes, he will. With a 128.6, manages to take back pole position by only a 10th. Obviously, a bunch of other drivers now currently back out on track. We can see Lixon Jack currently beginning his timed run, currently in P6 with the 129.6 himself. Bang Ever Seb has a whole lot of traffic to deal with over here as he's managing to avoid the AlphaTauri, but does have the Aston Martin in front of him. So now Seb setting a 107.4, definitely not a purple sector 2, at least I don't think so. It is roughly 3/10 up on his time. Assuming that he can keep this pace up, he may be looking towards a top 5 finish, hopefully. Assuming that he can get this final corner down absolutely spot on, and it looks like he might have just barely done so. Seb, who's currently in P10, would like to get closer to his teammate, manages to set a 129.3 and actually does manage to close the gap to his teammate. Both Ferrari drivers sitting P2 and P5 respectively, as the Cunning Fern unfortunately gets disqualified from the session for blocking the pit lane. He's currently P18 now with a 130.8, and that's unfortunately going to drop him down into P20, and that's going to be the end of his qualifying run. Who else is out? We can see Bambino currently out on his fast lap, roughly a 10th up on his previous lap time. Obviously his previous lap time being a 129.1, but coming through sector 2, he's going to need to find a bit more time if he's looking to fight near the front of the grid. Obviously a lot of room for improvement left on the table as Bambino now coming towards the end of sector 2. How much time did he gain through that final corner? Let's take a look here. And he is up by roughly 2/10. But with only 1 or 2 more corners left to go, will it be enough? Obviously not a whole lot of time left in this session, only 5 minutes and 57 seconds left. Bambino now through the final corner, currently in P3. He did need a considerable amount more time to fight near the front of the grid, but let's see if he's able to pull that off. Comes across the line, sets a 128.9, and unfortunately it's not going to be enough to improve him up into P2 or P1. We can see Seb on his own run. We can see Jim now coming towards the end of his run, currently in P4 with a 129.3. Unfortunately, we weren't able to follow him through his lap, so we're not too sure how up he is or down on his time, but judging by how fast he's going at the moment, sets a 128.9, and he does manage to beat Bambino and manages to promote himself up into the top 3. Trem's now beginning his run as well. Haggis in the AlphaTauri managing to surprise everyone, coming up in with a 129.2, seemingly out of nowhere, manages to put himself up in P5. And that does seem to be the end of most of the drivers' second run. They're going to come back into the pits and probably put on their freshest compound of tires, lower that fuel as much as possible, and then go out for their what should be the final run of qualifying. Obviously, a bunch of drivers still out on track trying to set their competitive lap times as of right now. Trem's coming in close to about the halfway point on this lap. And coming through Sector 2, it seems to be Trem's is going to be up by roughly... No, never mind. Down by 5.6 seconds. Never mind. I thought he was pushing that lap. Unfortunately, Blurry is extremely slow as well at the moment. DDK, though, however, a minute hit by... He needs to get into the 107s or 106s if he's looking to really fight for this. And he does, a 107.2, an incredibly fast Sector 2. He's roughly 4.5 tenths up on his time. Granted, he can keep this pace up. He might be looking to push towards a top 5 finish as well, but now coming through the final corner, he does manage to avoid the traffic that was impeding him there. And now DDK, currently in P11 with a 129.6, very far off from the top 5, comes across the line and sets a 129.1 and manages to promote himself up into P5. Very nice lap from him. And as almost all the drivers now come back into the pits, they're going to be beginning to prepare for their final stints, as Jack is going incredibly slowly on his outlap. Not too sure what he's planning to do there. We can see Jags, his teammate, also currently out for his outlap, currently in P18 with a 130.4, very far off the mark. And Alu, who unfortunately did join us midway through the session, currently out on his outlap, hasn't set a timed run yet. So it'll all just come down into what he can produce in the final few minutes of this qualifying session. Alright, then while we have the chance, why not keep an eye on the driver who's currently leading the charge? It seems to be Jags with a 130.4. Let's see if he can hopefully improve this lap. Anything would be better than starting in P18. And riding on board with Jags, we can see how dirty that McLaren is. He most likely had spun off the track and into some gravel, but now coming towards the end of Sector 1 with only one turn left, will he be up on his time? I'd be surprised if he isn't. Jack King's managing to be roughly 5 tenths up on his time already, just showing you that he must have had some sort of incident in his first timed run. But now, how much more will he be able to improve by? He's already going for the 129.9s, which should be roughly placing him in the top, well, P12 to P14 region. And now coming through the third DRS zone. Obviously, unfortunately, he doesn't have a toe on him at the moment, as most of the drivers are now out on the track to begin their final runs. Only a minute and 48 seconds left to go as well. Now Jack King's coming across Sector 2, still roughly 5 tenths up on his time, has not gained a whole lot through that section. As a matter of fact, lost a few hundredths there, but hopefully that shouldn't be enough to really hinder him as he's coming down to the final corner and crosses the DRS detection point. Will Jack Kings on his final run be able to push himself up high up on the grid, comes across the line, currently P18, jumps up to a P12. Unfortunately, not the greatest lap from him. His teammate Jack, meanwhile at the moment roughly 6.5 tenths up on his current lap time, will be looking to extend the gap to his teammate. Obviously not the best flyer from him in the previous few sessions, but now Jack coming across the line manages to set a 128.8. A fantastic lap from Jack there as he manages to promote himself up into P3 from seemingly out of nowhere. A very impressive lap time from him, but right now we'll be keeping our eye on the provisional pole sitter Steba, as he has set a 128.6. The gap to P2 at the moment is still roughly a tenth. So it'll all come down to how much he can extend this gap by here. Tier 2 being awfully close to each other. I'm very surprised the top 5 all running in contention, all being in the sub 128s as well. He does manage to set a purple sector 1, and now coming through sector 2. I wouldn't be surprised if he sets a purple section here as well. Luckily for Steba, he has absolutely no traffic ahead of him, so it should be completely clear skies from here. Easy sailing till the end of this lap, assuming that he can keep it out on track. But ladies and gentlemen, with that, the time for qualifying has elapsed, and now it's down to where drivers can set their final lap times. Obviously, Trems and Zavs will not be improving anymore, and they'll be staying P9 and P16 respectively unless someone can overtake them. Bang average Seb staying in P8 with a 129.3. Steba now coming towards the final corner on track. What time will he be able to set? Well, how much more will he extend this gap by? Oh, and he gets extremely squarely through that exit there. That must have heavily compromised him. Steba comes across the line, finishes with a 128.699, barely misses out on improving. Hopefully, if he hadn't had that incident, he surely would have. But now, what does this mean for Dax as he comes across the final corner? Obviously, only a tenth to improve by. Will he be overtaking Dax, Steba, and taking provisional pole? He comes across the line, and he does so. Dax manages to take provisional pole by 2 seconds. Jack obviously not improving anymore in this scenario. Jim seems to be down on his current lap time. Bambino now coming across the line sets a 128.6, only 300 separating him and Steba, and he manages to promote himself up into P3. It said Jim was down on his current lap time, but as he's coming across the line, let's see if he actually does manage to improve. And no, he does seem like he's abandoning his lap and going into the pits. DDK does not look like he's going to be improving too much on this occasion either. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, that will be the end of qualifying. A fantastic qualifying session, I must say, with P1 to P5 all being in the sub 128s. A big congratulations to Dax for setting the first provisional pole of the season with a 128.4. Steba in P2 in the Alfa Romeo with a 128.6. 628 should mention, since Bambino currently in P3 with the Mercedes with a 128.655. I know Blood was telling me that Dax is going to set about a quicker lap than most of 95% of Tier 1, but the fact that some of these other drivers were managing to stick with him and the gap isn't nearly as large as I was predicting it would be, it goes credit that there's some high quality racing in store for us in Tier 2 this season. Oh, you think Dax is just sandbagging? Just letting them think they have a chance, and then he's just gonna pull away from them in the race. That's rude. Okay then, after such an exciting qualifying, we only have the even more exciting race in store for us now. Obviously, there won't be any formation laps at the start of this race, so drivers will be just waiting for the red lights to go off and will be taking off as soon as they get the chance. So we should be in store for some exciting racing today. This means I get less of a time to set everything up. But ladies and gentlemen, we are all set to get Season 14 of ALR all underway. There's 5 red lights. It's lights out and away we go here at the Bahrain track. Dax seems to have gotten off to a very nice start, and Stava side by side with him heading into turn 1. Who's going to come out on top? Stava sends it down the inside of Dax, and with that inside line manages to make the overtake complete and manages to promote himself up into P1. Dax unfortunately drops down into P2. We can see Bambino sticking right behind them in P3. Jack staying in P4 but still under massive amounts of pressure from the Red Bull behind him. Jaguar now sends it down the inside and managing to keep that position. The battle still going on between both these drivers as they're still side by side for P4 at the moment. Both Jack and Jaguar having very nice clean racing, and Jack unfortunately has to compromise the position, and Jaguar manages to make the overtake. We can see there was a bit of contact between Jack and DDK there, but DDK does manage to bounce back from it, promoting himself back up into P7. An exciting start to this race as we can see a bit more action at the back over there as Shadow sends it down the inside of Seb. A very late break as the tires lock up there. And oh, there's been an incident involving both drivers. Unfortunately, there's a bit of contact between them. And Bang Average Seb and Shadow unfortunately lose out on massive amounts of position. But we're going to bring our attention back towards the front of the grid. Bambino now roughly 3.5 tenths behind Dax. He cannot absolutely let them go. He needs to stay as close to them as possible and maintain as small of a gap so that he can stay within that slipstream. Obviously, Jaguar roughly a second behind Bambino at the moment. Assuming that he can maintain this gap until DRS goes active, he's in great shape to maybe make some potential overtakes here. Haggis now all of a sudden in P8 right behind DDK. Stava obviously setting the fastest lap time of this race. And we can see now Haggis slowly, ever so slowly gaining on DDK. Will he make a dive down the inside? We can see an overtake happening at the front of the grid as Jack and Jim now come into a battle with each other. And Jim manages to make the overtake and promotes himself up into P5. Overtakes throughout the up and down throughout the whole grid, and it's very impressive that we've only had really one big incident as Alu and Zab actually have to head into the pits to fix their cars up because of some damage. Looking back up the grid, we can see Stava now already beginning to pull away a 1.3 second gap by the end of lap 1. It may have been true what Blood was telling me about him sandbagging. And we can see Dagas and DDK now coming into a battle themselves side by side with each other. Who's going to come out ahead? It's a very late braking over here, and it seems with the outside line, Haggis does manage to make the overtake stick and does manage to keep that position at P7, but DDK not done with him just yet. Actually, he might just be begins to drop off ever so slightly. Relatively clean racing so far. We can see Jags getting very close behind Trems as well, trying to pressure the Red Bull driver into some sort of mistake. Obviously looking for any opportunity he can to maybe make a potential dive on him, and maybe if he can line himself up well through this corner, which he's done absolutely effortlessly. Jags now side by side with Trems heading towards the final corner out on track. It doesn't look like it's going to be much of a contention as Jags does manage to make the overtake and promotes himself up into P11. But ladies and gentlemen, this is where things now get interesting as DRS has now been enabled, so cars behind within a second behind each other will be able to activate their DRS, which is basically a flap that lifts up on the rear spoilers if you've never watched F1 before, as we can see over there on the rear spoiler. And now Bambino will be using that to try to close the gap to Dax, but unfortunately he's a bit too far back on this occasion to make any sort of overtake. But obviously the problem with following cars through these tight and twisty sections is that dirty air. You lose a bit of time trying to keep up with them. But obviously it doesn't seem like it's bothering Bambino too much. The gap did drop down by roughly a tenth to roughly 5.58 seconds. And Stava continuing to maintain that 1.3 second advantage he has on P2 at the moment. But with roughly 6.5 tenths being the gap between Bambino and Dax, will he be able to close the gap? It doesn't seem to be the case. DRS still proving to be a bit shorter than what was needed from him. Looking down the grid, we can see Trems getting extremely close to Font now, almost pressuring that. He's basically pushing that Williams across, and we can see a bit of a DRS train now beginning to form from P2 all the way down to P6. And then, of course, from P9 all the way down to P15. Oh, and just as I say that, Jack Kings has unfortunately lost his car. It doesn't look like he's actually looks like he managed to save it very, very nicely, as I don't see any debris out on track, so he may have avoided any sort of damage. But bringing our attention back to the front of the grid, Bambino now roughly 3/10 behind Dax, actually chooses to not make the overtake right now and decides to stick behind him for just one more sector, hopefully trying to get him past him in the second DRS zone. And with DRS wide open now, Bambino will be trying to make this lunge on Dax. Will he be able to do so? He's a bit too far back on this occasion and decides to stick the car right behind him and play it safer and heading into the next corner. We can see now Font, who was behind Trems, who was being pushed around by Trems, has unfortunately been overtaken by him and could not get that position back on the next DRS zone. It really is through Sector 1 where drivers are struggling to follow each other, obviously that being the tightest and twistiest section out on track. But Bambino not done trying just as yet. DRS once again wide open, but unfortunately, I'll call it right now as well, yeah, it's just too far back. You need to have like roughly 2.5 tenth gap to the car in front of you if you're looking to overtake through that third DRS zone. August in P7 pushing Jack along now. Trying to bide his time, trying to get the proper run out of a corner. It looks like Jack is extremely slippery through that corner. I'm not too sure if that was ping or what that was. And Dax has unfortunately actually managed to catch up to Staba by roughly a second. He may not have DRS on this occasion. Actually, he does have DRS on this occasion, and that's going to greatly assist him in maintaining that gap to Bambino. Meanwhile, Haggis in P7 with his DRS wide open, looking to overtake Jack, sending it down the inside, heading into turn 1, and it won't even be much of a battle as the Alpha Tauri drivers now sit P5 and P6 respectively. Some great overtaking by these drivers, and Font once again losing out on positions. Unfortunately tried to get into a battle with Trends but does not manage to make the overtake stick, and that heavily compromises him. And now Will looking to make the most out of this situation. Unfortunately with the outside line, he's going to try to send it down around the outside, but unfortunately not enough grip there for him to make that move stick, and he'll stay back in P12. Bringing our attention back to Jack and Haggis, of course. Both these drivers sticking ever so closely with each other. The gap being roughly being half a tenth and a half. And now Jack, unfortunately, has a very slippy exit through that corner, and that may have just compromised him enough to not be able to send a move down the inside here. So he's gonna have to stick behind him and hopefully wait for another opportunity for it to present itself. Keeping my eye on the timing sheets at the top of the grid. Obviously, Dax still roughly 6/10 off of Staba. Bambino roughly 7/10 off of Dax. But now with the DRS zone right in front of them, and Dax with DRS, will he be able to make a potential move on the race leader and take lead of this race? Unfortunately, it looks like he's a bit too far back on this occasion to send it down into turn 1. But assuming that he could line himself up perfectly, he may be looking to get an overtake down in the second DRS zone. Oh, and it looked like he did seem to get a really nice run out of that corner, but with DRS wide open, I can imagine Staba's using every bit of his battery to make sure he stays in P1, and which he does. But obviously all this close-knit racing has allowed Bambino to massively close the gap. Meanwhile, Jaguar in P4 with a 2.4 second gap to P3. Some overtakes going on near the end of the grid, but right now there's so much action happening near the front. I want to make sure I don't miss anything. Dax with roughly a 2.5 tenth gap, now a 3/10 gap. In the third DRS zone, we were saying that might be roughly what you need to the car in front of you, and now Dax sending it down the inside for the lead of the race, and he does manage to make the move stick, promotes himself up into P1, but Staba, however, not done with him just yet. Meanwhile, Bambino trying to pick up the scraps and trying to get past Staba while he can. Ooh, the incredibly late braking from the Mercedes. They're surprised there wasn't a collision between the front three, but luckily for us, there isn't. And now we can see Bambino trying to get out of the slipstream, maybe looking for a potential dive on trust, trying to scare Staba into forcing him into some sort of mistake here. Now Staba with the DRS. Obviously Dax will be moving across the track ever so slightly just to break the toe and prevent the overtake. but it doesn't look like it's going to be enough. Staba once again attacking for the race lead, sending it down turn 1. They're both side by side with each other, and now who's going to come out on top? It seems like Dax got the better grip out of that corner and manages to stay in P1, but the battle is still not far from over as Staba with DRS once again tries to send it down the inside of Dax. This is where Dax managed to make the overtake last time. Sorry, Dax managed to make the overtake over in the third DRS zone, but now P1 and P2 are both side by side with each other, and Staba decides to once again back out of it, but Bambino looking to pick up the scraps, trying to find that slightest gap so that he can just squeeze through and promote himself up into P2. P1 and P3 fighting absolutely fiercely. Yeah, sure, I'll show you guys the tires as well. We can see Dax is currently on the hard, Staba on the mediums, and Bambino also on the hard. So it's only a matter of time before Staba's wheels start to really fall off, and Bambino and Dax will really be able to come into a form of their own. I'm sure that's basically what Bambino is waiting for. It's just waiting for the right opportunity to attack, knowing that the driver in front of him is on a different compound of tires. You can see actually Jim getting very close to Jaguar as well, fighting for the potential P4. And all of a sudden, it looks like Staba is beginning to drop off from Dax, a roughly 7/10 gap to P1. But Bambino managing to stay within roughly 3/10 to P2 at the moment. Lap 7 of 29. I'm surprised Bambino is choosing not to stay in the slipstream, deciding to probably stay back for a bit longer as Staba is trying to close the gap to P1. Oh, actually, he sends an incredibly late dive bomb there. I was not expecting that from Bambino. And there was contact between both drivers. You know, Staba is going to be absolutely furious about that. But what this has done is allowed Bambino to get a potential overtake. But unfortunately, he decides to stay back on this occasion. Meanwhile, Jaguar makes the dive bomb for P4 and manages to make the move and promotes himself back up into P4. Jim, of course, not done with him just as yet. Will be sticking right behind him and waiting for the next opportunity that presents itself. Looking a bit down the grid, we can see Haga's getting still very close to Jack. These two have basically been inseparable throughout the entire race. Jack Kings as well, 3/10 behind Blurry. Oh, and that incident seemed to have caused a massive gap between Staba and Dax. And what this has done is allowed Staba to get out of the DRS zone, and that opens a massive window for Bambino to make a potential overtake. The Mercedes basically pushing that Alfa Romeo along. He's going to have to be incredibly careful that he doesn't send a dive bomb. Obviously, with every passing lap, Staba's tires will get weaker and weaker. You think Bambino lost the brakes there? Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. He did. I was not expecting him to send it down the insides with such a late move, but I'm guessing that must have been what happened. Let's hope that he can hopefully make this overtake now in a more cleaner fashion, as he's now pulling around to the outside, which will inevitably end up leading towards the inside line, heading into turn 1. And it's not even really going to be much of a contention, as Bambino has managed to promote himself up into P2, and Staba unfortunately drops down into P3. The medium runners really feeling that wear and tear of their tires. Now Staba doesn't look like he's going to be close enough to really fight for this position back, and will have to stay in P3. Meanwhile, Jaguar basically pushing Jim along here. It was almost a 1/10 of a gap, and I'm surprised Jaguar just didn't decide to send it down the inside there. Looking a bit further down the grid, we can see Will and Saeed extremely close together. This is for the final points spot, final points receiving position on track. Lap 9 of 29, only 20 more laps left to go in this session. No safety car as of yet, so that's always a good start. But now how will Will respond here with DRS wide open? Will he be able to get Saeed on this straight? It doesn't seem he will. Saeed looking like he's going to be using every bit of his battery to keep that position. And it seemed to have worked for him, as he's managing to stay in P10 at the moment. As Jim becomes the first driver in P4 to pick up a time-second penalty. A 3-second penalty for multiple invalidations there, as Jaguars actually managed to get past Jim. I was wondering what happened there. Now all of a sudden Staba and Bambino fighting for the front of the lead, fighting for the P2. Once again, Staba does manage to get past Bambino on this occasion. I completely missed that overtake, and that's frustrating. But Bambino now, once again, with DRS wide open, looking to fight back for P2. Oh, extremely late braking by the Mercedes driver there. We can see that there's basically inches separating both drivers. Luckily, they come out of it unscathed, and now Bambino's going to have the tough task of following Steva through this tight and twisty section. You don't know if it's going to be difficult unless he's drunk. You never really know with ALR. Some people need everybody has their own way to cope with the races. Steva just needs to stick with Bambino till lap 13 now. Right, going back to the action now. Bambino roughly 3/10 separating him and Steva. Steva obviously on the medium tires. His tires will surely be beginning to wear out right about now. And Bambino's hard tire compounds are obviously going to start coming into form. But heading down the next DRS zone, it doesn't look like Steva's really going to have anywhere to run over here. Let's take a look if we can get an idea on his battery. He is using the overtake button, trying to create that gap as much as he can, and Bambino unfortunately unable to catch up to him. We'll have to stay in P3 for the moment. Ooh, and Steva gets extremely squarely on the exit there. That's heavily compromised, and Bambino now, seeing an opportunity presenting itself, will have to send it down the inside of Steva, and with that inside line, he does manage to make the move stick. Steva trying to get the switchback on Bambino, and what a fantastic switchback it was. Steva once again back up in P2. A fantastic move from him to retain that position. And Bambino once again will have to compromise and have to stick behind Steva once again, as it's beginning to probably get frustrating for him, as he's unable to pull away or make the move with the better compounded tires at the moment. I'll be very honest, the only real exciting battle to be watching at the moment is for P2. So we'll be keeping our eye on this for the most part of this race so far. Roughly 3/10 now separating Bambino and Steva. And as that gap slowly comes down further and further and further, you really start to wonder that it's really just about time before Bambino manages to get past him. But Steva, massive credit to him, is managing to stay in this battle for an extended period of time. But what this is allowing Daxi to do is allowing him to pull away from the rest of the field with a 2.7 second gap. And Bambino now once again with DRS going side by side with Steva. It looked like he hadn't managed to pull away, as there's a bit of contact there from Steva due to his late braking, but thankfully it hasn't severely compromised Bambino. And now Steva once again DRS wide open, heading down the second DRS zone. He looks towards the inside line, possibly just trying to scare Bambino into a mistake, and he's unable to do so, so he'll have to just stay behind him for this current moment. And as he comes through that corner, there's a very squarely exit as well. So you can tell Steva is definitely beginning to struggle on those tires. Looking down the grid, we can see Trems and Saeed coming into a battle. There's a three-way fight going on over here, as Will the Game's trying to send it around the outside of Saeed. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like he's going to be able to get the move done, and he's going to have to stay behind him at this current stage. Massive respect to Will for even attempting to make such a bold move. And we've entered the point in the race where the hard tires are now definitely the better tires to be on. So it's only a matter of time before we see some of these medium runners begin to start dropping down. If you were Steva, you would pit lap 12 of 29, go for the undercut. I'm pretty sure the undercut's a lot stronger on at Bahrain anyways, isn't it? I might be wrong on that, but from what I remember at least. But Steva decides not to go in for the pits. He decides with his DRS wide open, he's massively catching up to the Mercedes, and he manages to make the overtake before the corner even begins. Bambino looking to maybe get a switchback or just line himself up perfectly heading into the next corner. He attempted the switchback, unfortunately wasn't able to get the move done, but now what that's allowed him to do is get DRS on Steva heading down into the next DRS zone as Bambino and Steva get awfully squirrely there. Thank God there wasn't a big collision between the drivers due to confusion, but Bambino once again gets overtaken by Steva, and Steva manages to stay in P2. Undercut is good, yeah, but when the others have mediums and are 3 laps fresher, the gap will come back down in 2 laps max. Yeah, that's most likely what's gonna happen. He just keeps losing time to Dax. He's just being silly passing Bambino. Yeah, it's if I was Steva, I would just try to stick behind Bambino for as much as you can. Use that DRS to your advantage and try to close the gap to Daxi, because now that gap went up from a 2.7 second gap to a 3.6 seconds. So it's just utterly ridiculous now. But alas, I'm not their race engineer, so it's not my problem necessarily. But Bambino now obviously must be getting extremely frustrated with Steva, as he's not able to lose him at all. Lap 13 of 29. Will Steva head into the pits for a potential early cut, as Bambino's a bit squirrely through that exit there, and with DRS now wide open, he's going to try to close the gap down. He's gaining ever so slightly on the Alfa Romeo. It might just be enough to head down into the turn 1. And now with the inside line, Bambino sends it down the inside and manages to make the move stick, promoting himself right back up into P2. Well, obviously Steva is not going to be done with him yet. Now he's going with Steva with the inside line, heading down the second DRS zone. Who's going to come out on top over here? Steva with the inside line. They're both side by side. They make a bit of contact with each other. They're still side by side. This is for the second P2 position, and now Bambino's trying to lose him with that tire advantage, and he does manage to do so. However, was there contact there? We'll have to see later on. Steva does unfortunately go off the track there. It was good racing, but unfortunately a bit of contact there. It has heavily compromised Steva, and the gap to Daxi has now shot up to 4.4 seconds. That must be incredibly frustrating for Bambino, as he's just looking to close the gap to P1, but Steva just not allowing it at the moment. Fair play to Steva, obviously fighting for what is to be his best position, but it would just been the smarter thing to do, to just stick behind Bambino at the moment. Yeah, it's just becoming impossible for him to catch up to Dax. We're going to have to hope for a safety car if Bambino's looking to fight for the lead of this race at this point. And now Steva finally decides to go into the pits. Jaguar following right behind him. What this means for everybody else. Jack now heading into the pits. Jack heading into the pits with his 14 lap old hards? Really? I'm very surprised that Jack actually decided to go into the pits there. It seems to be Will has also followed suit. But with those pit stops, ladies and gentlemen, Dax now currently still leading your race. Bambino in P2, Trems in P3. Steva has dropped down into P4 with a fresh set of hard tires. All part of the Jackster plan. Bang average Seb actually managing to close the gap significantly to Samet. And it doesn't look like Samet's really going to be able to do much over here, as the Ferrari engine sharing team as Ferrari manages to get past Haas and promotes himself up into P9. And after those pit stops, the gaps have significantly increased between the drivers. Incredible to see that the gap between Trems and Bambino is roughly 20 seconds. Just goes to show you how fast the top three were as compared to each other. And now Dax, who was your race leader, has now decided to come into the pits, decides to switch off of the hards and move on to the medium tires. Bambino following suit as well, switches off his hards and moves on to the medium tires. But this is a big question. Will Steva manage to undercut Bambino
It doesn't look like he might be able to. It'll be incredibly close, if anything. Now Bambino coming out of the pits, and Steva slowly trying his best to catch up to him. But unfortunately, the undercut does not work. However, Bambino will be on a very much colder set of tires, and that will heavily cost him. Heading down the second DRS zone now. Bambino pushing his car to the absolute limit, and now Steva unfortunately unable to make the overtake stick, and will have to stay behind him in P4. And we're right back to where we started. Dax still leading this race. Bambino and Steva still fighting it out for the second podium position. Incredibly tight-knit racing here. Trems, Alu, and Zab being the only few drivers at the moment to not come in for their pits. DDK still on his 12-lap old softs. Desperately hoping for a safety car. One that's unfortunately not necessarily coming. The Bambino now. Oh, what happened there? It looked like someone went incredibly wide off track. Steva now side by side with Bambino, heading down towards the final corner out on track. But decides to stay back for now, maybe to get that DRS advantage. And now we can see Bambino obviously catching up to Trems. Trems on those 15-lap-old hards is basically in the way from Bambino. However, he's going to be using that DRS to his advantage. Bambino, will there be potentially 3 wide? There will be potentially 3 wide heading into turn 1. Who's going to come out on top here? Steva with the inside line manages to make a fantastic overtake on both the drivers. However, Bambino not done just as yet. Will not be letting Steva go. Now with DRS wide open and catching up to Steva, heading down the second DRS zone. Bambino with the inside line, unable to make the overtake stick, and Steva manages to make a fantastic overtake on both those drivers and manages to promote himself up into P2. That was a fantastic move from Steva, making a absolute dive bomb with 3 wide heading into the first corner, and now Jim also managing to get past Trems. Trems is basically out there on basically a sitting duck, with how his tires are falling apart. But obviously this is a fight that we've been seeing play out throughout the whole race. Steva and Bambino at each other's throats, not letting off each other for even a second. And Bambino just trying to find every sort of gap he can. Obviously, he does have the medium tires, so that will play in his advantage through the corners. But Steva doing a great job covering those corners off to prevent Bambino from sending it down the inside. However, I don't think there's much he can do to stop him here. With DRS wide open now, he's going to be looking to definitely make an easy pass on Steva. As I say that, Steva's still using his battery. It doesn't look like he's gonna let Bambino go by so easily. However, with those fresh tires, it wasn't really much of a battle. And Bambino now promotes himself up into P2. Steva now with DRS trying to fight back for this position. Bambino takes the inside line heading into the next corner. And with that inside line, will he be able to keep that position? Yes, he will. Bambino stays in P2 and Steva will have to stay in P3 for now. And what this battle has done is it's brought Jim completely out of nowhere into this battle as well. Currently sitting in P4 and only 3/10 behind P2 and P3 at the moment. Steva will have the quicker tires at the end. He just needs to not let Bambino get away. Whoa, what happened here? Oh, it looks like there's been it looks like Trems and Jaguar actually swapped positions by the looks of it. I might be wrong there. I don't think that was a overtake that was made intentionally, or overtake that was made simply through battling. It seemed like that was more team orders more than anything else. But bringing our attention back towards the front 4, Bambino now 7.9 seconds off of Dax. And the battle for P2 continues amongst them. Steva obviously trying to stay as close to Bambino as possible, as what Blood was saying earlier as well. Stable will just has to, he just has to stay behind Bambino. It's not a battle for him. He'll obviously have the faster tires near the end, but of course Steba does not give a shit. He is going side by side with Bambino over here, trying to go around the outside, but of course that does not work out for him. And there was collision between both drivers, and once again Steba stays in P3. I don't understand why Steba won't just stay within that DRS zone. He's compromising his own tires for the sake of what? An overtake that's going to inevitably come to him near the end of this race? 10 laps left to go now. Let's see what Dax is up to in his peaceful world. Absolutely no worries whatsoever for him. And interestingly enough, Steba has fallen back from Bambino, and what this is, and now Jim all of a sudden is in contention for the final step of the podium as Dax sets the fastest lap time of the race with a 1:31.0. And now heading down the pit straight, Steba pulls into the slipstream of Bambino. And Bambino's fast flashing red lights signifying they both try to brake to get the DRS advantage heading into the next corner. And it doesn't look like that's going to pay out for Steba as Bambino seems to have won out on this one. And now who will have DRS? It seems to be Bambino at the moment. Bambino now trying to send it down the inside. Steba basically pushing him into that corner over there and trying to get the move done. And there's once again collision between both these drivers. There may be some stewards reports coming in later today. And what that has done, Jim is completely out of nowhere made a fantastic overtake and promotes himself up into P2. What a fantastic move from him. Bambino still battling it out with Steba at the moment. They're really pushing each other off track. What kind of dirty driving is this? Steba now with the inside line trying to get the move done on Bambino, and it looks like it has worked out, but Bambino now with the switchback trying to get the move, trying to get P3 right back from Steba. It seems like Steba they both have DRS heading into this next corner. Oh, what is this? Massive collision between Steba and Bambino. Where does this put Steba? Where did he go? What on earth just happened there? Nah, that's appalling. You can't seriously be driving like that in this league and expecting to get away with it. That's absolutely ridiculous. Jaguar, of course, should have an easy overtake here on Steba, who I'm assuming has massive front wing damage after a huge collision like that. I'm surprised he didn't retire. And of course, Steba now heading into the pits to fix his car up from the damages he received earlier. Jack managing to get past Steba, of course. And all of a sudden, just over the course of a few seconds, the entire grid has changed around. Dax, of course, still leading this race. Jim currently in P2. And of course, Jaguar now promoted up into P3. It took one sector to define everything. That's extremely disappointing racing from these drivers. You would expect something better there, but it was a battle. It was an incident that was just building up one after the other, with one incident after the other, unfortunately. But now we have some fresh new faces fighting for the podium. Jack currently in P4. Roughly 0.6 off of Jaguar. Unfortunately, Jack does have that time penalty. Let's take a look at those penalties. It seems to be only 3 seconds, so it's not too bad. However, it's not going to definitely be great. And it doesn't help that Jaguar does have the better tire compound, at least for nearing the end of the race. Looking down the grid, we can see Bambino, who seemingly actually managed to get away without any damage. Surprisingly, or if he has damage, he certainly hasn't come in to repair it. Certainly hasn't come in to repair it. Now, ooh, a bit of a risky fake out there from Trems. And Bambino staying in P6 at the moment. What about Jack? DRS wide open, trying to catch up to Jaguar. Jaguar seems to be just a bit too far back on this occasion for him to make any potential overtakes there. And now Bambino going side by side with Trems does manage to make the overtake before the corner even begins, and will most likely be promoted up into P5. What this has done is Hag Haggis has all of a sudden gotten very interested in potentially improving his positions. Gets a fantastic run out of that corner. DRS wide open, seemingly out of nowhere, manages to promote himself up into P6. Extremely late braking from him as he nearly sends it into the Mercedes. And what this has allowed to do Trems to do is pull the switch back around. But unfortunately, Trems does compromise, and he does decide to stay back and allows Haggis to have the position. So the AlphaTauri now promoted up into P6. Rotten tomatoes, eggs, and thumbs downs in the chat for that terrible racing that we saw earlier, but unfortunately, it is what it is. We have a yellow flag in sector 2. Oh, never mind. Lap 22 of 29, 7 laps to go. Not one safety car, surprisingly, through this race. And with only a few more laps left to go, there's only a limited amount of time Jack has before he's able to make this overtake and potentially put himself up on the podium. We'll have to see how he does here. 3/10 separating him and Jaguar. DRS wide open now as he's slowly trying to gain on Jaguar at this current moment. Will it be enough to maybe send a dive bomb down the inside into turn 1? Yes, it will. Jack now deciding that now is the opportunity. Sends the dive bomb down the inside and manages to make the overtake stick. Jaguar now with DRS wide open, hopefully, is going to contend for this position right back, trying to make the move and get back into P3. But unfortunately, he's still too far back. He's going to have to stay in P4 at the moment. Bambino obviously involved in that incident earlier. Currently now in P5 is not where he would want to be. I think we'll definitely be seeing some interesting stewards reports after this race as well. Ever since that incident, it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot more action going out on track at the moment. Obviously, we have Jack and Jaguar fighting it out for P3 at the moment, but Jaguar now beginning to drop back by roughly 8/10. Haggis, however, keeping that gap to Bambino, not allowing Bambino to go through, probably waiting for the next DRS zone to gain that advantage and make that potential overtake. And now Haggis with DRS wide open. Will he be able to catch Bambino on this straight? Only 5 more laps left to go. It's either now or never, and it looks like he will be able to catch up to Bambino, but he decides to stay back and not make the move. Obviously being aware that he has the more advantageous tires near the end of this race. But Haggis unfortunately unable to catch up to Bambino and make the overtake heading down the second DRS zone. Oh, there's a bit of an incident revolving around Samad, Blurry, and Saeed over there. Samad unfortunately spins his car out. Luckily for us, he hasn't retired, so he's still in contention for this race and maybe potential points, but he has a mountain to climb ahead of him. And now we can see Jaguar has actually managed to fall out of a second behind Jack, not even having DRS through that straight anymore. And only 4 more laps left to go in this race. Doesn't seem like there's really any battles going on near the front of the grid other than for potential P5 here. Haggis on the 9-lap-old hards, Bambino on his 8-lap-old mediums. The mediums are obviously clearly still kicking, and Bambino, through qualifying, we know is the faster driver. However, with DRS and slipstream all coming into play here, will Haggis send it down the inside? No, he will not. Is still attempting to get a better exit through these corners as compared to Bambino so he can make a potential overtake. I once again feel like he's still too far back to make any sort of moves. As there's a battle between Blurry and Jags. This is for P11. No points available on the table as of right now. And it seems to be the most impressive team throughout this first race of the season is seemingly Red Bull at the moment, with both Jaguar and Trems in the top 10. I'm not forgetting, of course, AlphaTauri with Jim and Haggis currently in P2 and P6 respectively as well. So both Red Bull and AlphaTauri looking to be extremely dominant this season, hopefully. Obviously, Dax in the Ferrari is leading this race. Where did Jack even start? Jack started pretty high up on the grid. I'm pretty sure he started P4th, I want to say. Yeah, P4. Actually, this is something that would be interesting. I do want to see who has gained the most amount of time, most amount of positions. And at the moment, it seems to be Trems, who's currently sitting in P7, has gained a substantial amount of positions. And now we keep an eye on Haggis with DRS wide. No, still refusing to. Didn't even open up his DRS in that section. We have a yellow flag in sector 1 and 3. It seems to be a Red Bull, and it is the Red Bull of Trems, who I was just talking about about his considerable positions that he's gained, and now all of a sudden he's retired out of the race. And that's going to be the end of his run. Of course, retiring in the pit, so we won't be having a safety car out on track, and I'm pretty sure we wouldn't even get one with 3 laps left to go in this race. As Samet now comes into the pits as well. Switching on to the soft tire compound, trying to steal away the fastest lap point from Dax. And Shadow, within only the last 3 laps, picks up a 3-second time penalty. It's going to definitely... Actually, he's still all the way down in P19. I'm sure it's not going to make too much of a difference, but... No, Jack's had a very impressive lap time. Starting in P4. August now with only 2 more laps left to go. Will this be a repeat of what we've been seeing for the last few couple of laps? Once again, DRS wide open as August doesn't look like he's going to be close enough to Bambino to really make an effort. Decides to stay back once again. This being one of the closest battles out on track, and we can see a battle over here for P10 at the moment. Blurry, Julio, and Jack Kings. Blurry, Jack Kings, and Saeed, all in contention for the final points. For the final points position out here on track. And now we can see Blurry trying to get past Jack Kings as soon as possible with the inside line. Now sends it down the inside of the McLaren. The Mercedes and the McLaren both going side by side with each other, and the Mercedes coming out ahead and promoting himself up into P10. Some good racing from the lower half of the grid, or the middle of the grid essentially. We do have another yellow flag in sector 3. It seems to be... Is that an Alpine? I think it might be an Alpine. It is. It's unfortunately Shadow, who's now disqualified from the session for going the wrong way. That's going to be the end of his race. 2 DNFs throughout this entire session and no safety cars. Stable, on the other hand, currently in P8, trying to catch up to bang average Seb. He's going through the DRS section right now. Sorry, not the DRS section. He's approaching the final corner out on track. And Stava has picked up a 30-second time penalty now. So things go from bad to worst for Stava as he's trying to catch up to bang average Seb as fast as he can. Now with DRS wide open, will he be able to make the overtake and promote himself up into P7? It looks like he will be able to sense it down the inside of the Ferrari and manages to make the move stick and promotes himself back up into P7. It is the penultimate lap here at Bahrain. And through all this drama, Seems like there's only really been one driver. Oh, and as I speak about drama, we can see Haggis has unfortunately lost his car there and cuts across the track, and that as a result forces him into receiving a 3-second time penalty. That is going to heavily hinder his chances in potentially getting past Bambino, as he's going to need an absolute miracle to pull that much of a gap out of... he's going to need an absolute miracle to pull that sort of a gap from Bambino now. It was bad enough that he was struggling to overtake him, and now all of a sudden he's lost out on that as well, as Font now picks up a 3-second time penalty. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we have begun the final lap of this race, lap 29 of 29. Dax, who's seemingly been unstoppable since the start of qualifying, has proven so as well, staying in P1 and most likely will be finishing in P1 unless something extremely dramatic happens. Obviously, we had that massive incident earlier in the race involving Steba and Bambino, which I'm sure will be looked heavily at in the stewards' room, but unfortunately, as of right now, it doesn't look like there's not going to be much that they can do for themselves. But we'll bring our attention to the driver who unfortunately did not get too much screen time today because nobody else could really catch up to him. Dax has been absolutely dominant through qualifying, through the race. He seemingly was completely unstoppable. It's basically like what Blood said, that he basically sandbagged qualifying. But regardless, there's many ways you can kick off the start of the season, but by winning the first race is the best possible way. Dax comes across the line and wins the Bahrain Grand Prix. Jim now coming across the line, he obviously has a few penalties of his own. It doesn't look like they're going to hinder him too much, however, as he comes across the line, will most likely be finishing up in P2. Now we have Jack behind him, who has 3 seconds of penalties worth the penalties himself. However, luckily for him, he has created roughly 4-second gap to the car behind him. Will be finishing in P3. Jaguar comes across the line, finishing in P4. Bambino, without any penalties, will be coming across the line and finishing in P5. We have Haggis in P6. Steba most likely finishing in P7. After picking up his 3-second time penalty, obviously an extremely frustrating race for him, and he may even lose out on one more position. As he does, Bank Average Seb manages to promote himself up into P7. Steva drops down to P8. Will comes across the line and finishes up in P9, and Blurry will come across the line and finish up in P10. I have very mixed opinions about this race. I personally enjoyed it. It was a great race. It's painful to see incidents like that throw such great racing away. But regardless, you can't take away from what Dax absolutely pulled out of his hat today. A fantastic race from him, absolutely dominant from the get-go. A big congratulations to him, Jim, and Jack for securing the podium positions so early on in the season. Alright, let's see if we can get any of these drivers in for an interview. I'm pretty sure Jack agreed. We'll see if anybody else can join. And if they do, then I'm sure we'll have a better perspective on what's going on. All right, there we go. Finally, PlayStation Party connected. All right, I'll start off with Jim. Jim, congratulations, third place in your first race of the season. How do you feel, man? Talk me through your race.
I felt quite alright actually. Yeah, my start was a bit shitty. Saber got the better of me, but yeah, the race isn't won on the first lap, so I just set it out, drove through the stint, and then luckily Steba and Bambino ended up fighting for a couple of laps, and that gave me the opportunity to get out of the DRS gap, and then it was my own race.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, I'm sure it massively helped that, you know, P2 and P3 behind you were basically fighting it out throughout the entire race. We were talking about that as well, that, you know, if they just basically stopped fighting amongst themselves and used that DRS to their advantage, then they may have caught up to you, but I saw the pace that you put up in qualifying, and obviously it translated straight to the race, so there's no better way to start a season off than with a win, huh?
Yeah, and I'm really happy that my teammate scored some good points as well. He managed to stay within the 3-second penalties that Steba got, so yeah, it's a good team effort.
No, absolutely. I'm sure you walked away from this weekend. I'm sure you're going to be incredibly satisfied, and I'm sure that lines you guys up extremely motivated for the next weekend as well. I'm sure you guys are going to do wonderfully there as well. But
definitely, I hope so.
Yeah, but a big congratulations, Dax. I'm sure you want to get some rest as well. I won't keep you here for too long if you don't want to stay. But yeah, once again, a big congratulations. Jack, congrats. P2, man. Fantastic race from you as well.
Wrong person.
Oh, wrong person? Oh, my bad. Jim? Sorry, man. I'm still a bit rusty from not commentating for a while. But Jim, sorry. Congratulations, P2. Talk me through your race, man. I'm sure you must have been the happiest man alive when you saw Steba and Bambino take each other out.
Yeah, you read my mind there. Yeah, it's true. I didn't have great pace, but I did the undercut while I was fighting with Jaguar. And then those two up front were fighting like hell, and they lost so much time, and then they started, well, let's say, bouncing off each other, and ultimately I could capitulate on them. So yeah.
I'm not too sure if we got like a proper
lucky race.
Yeah, I'm not too sure if we got a proper view of the incident through the stream. Unfortunately, it looked like so from our perspective, it looked like either Bambino or Steva basically drove the other person off the track. But I'm guessing what must have happened is that their wheels probably just got locked up amongst each other, and that's probably what happened. Do you have any idea, like a better insight as to what happened there?
Well, whilst we were going through turn 3, the right-hander, I believe, at the end of the second DRS straight, they tangled with each other, and that they lost a lot of momentum. So thereafter, it was three wide into the chicane complex, and thereafter touch, but I didn't see exactly what happened. But I think they tangled some of the wheels, yeah.
Oh, that reminds me, Jim. You made a fantastic overtake on them through Sector 1. That was absolutely sensational with them battling, and you managed to slip through. That was absolutely incredible, man. No, but you drove a fantastic race, and obviously, you know, a bit of luck always plays into any race, but I'm sure you're walking away from this extremely happy with yourself as well. So big congratulations on your P2 as well.
Cheers.
Hi, Jack.
You sound like Bloodwave.
Yeah, I know. I get that a lot. We're brothers. I don't know what else to expect. But yeah, Jack, congratulations, P3. I'm sure you weren't expecting to stand on the podium at midway through this race, but here you are. Talk to me, man. How was your race?
Well, a little ding dong in the first lap, but other than that, but the plan was hard medium. I knew it'd pay off at least, but then I did get a bit scared when the pace decided not to come straight away.
Mm-hmm.
But then eventually it did, and I got past Jaguar, and then the others blew up and gave me the podium.
Are any of you surprised that there were no safety cars in the first race?
Kinda not. I don't know.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess you were prepared for that, but that's fair. I mean, you had a fantastic qualifying pace. You qualified P4, obviously finishing in P3. On paper, you know, well deserved and everything. Obviously, you did have that incident at the beginning of the race where you dropped back significantly, but you know, way to fight back and whatnot. So, thank you for giving us such an entertaining race as well. But But I think that's gonna be all for now. We go to China next week, I believe. So
Oh no.
yeah, that's gonna be an exciting race. So
I'm gonna have to pull an ex-Matty G and do an absolute blind around there.
I'm excited to see that. Just make sure you don't take out half the grid when you do.
I did not take out anyone.
No, I'm saying make sure you don't for the next race.
Oh, I will.
Oh, brilliant.
Daxy's racing, I'm ploughing into him turn 1.
All right.
Please don't do that.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining and for the time for the interviews and stuff. Hopefully, I'll see you guys next race.
You, man.
Yeah, and hopefully
Appreciate you.
I'll be streaming again. Hopefully, I won't be ditching you guys for comms like I did last season. But yeah.
Sounds lovely, man. Have a good evening.
Yep. You too, man. Take care.
Bye.
All right.
Bye, everyone.